It's really helpful for the audience to have those little glimmers of hope, knowing that even as an individual, that you can make a difference.
Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Raven.
Welcome to the tie-in.
I love it. You know, I think we say this probably well too often, but it's like, feels like the fall is like everything for the whole year must get done. Every conference, every meeting, everything, every work. I'm like, okay.
It's intense right now. It is intense.
It's a pressure cooker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, with all the politics stuff and then the environmental stuff and then everything. It's just like, yeah, it feels like everybody's just trying to get it all in before the impending crash of something.
Yeah. It's,
hopefully not, but
just, I mean, I guess the word is intense and uncertain. And, like, I think people do feel that way. So, I certainly do. So we're just trying to, do good work, keep it going, totally. Inspire people, like hear them, that kind of thing. So we're rolling.
Yeah, and I'm still on my like 2-month networking junket, I call it. Just sort of like talking to everybody and reaching out and just having these like really great conversations on energy and the environment and where things are going and technology. And it's right now it's San Francisco Climate Week, or not Climate Week, San Francisco Tech Week. But there's like lots of stuff around like AI, anything with AI and energy. It's like oversubscribed, and we all know. I mean, AI is going to be infused in everything, of course. Obviously data centers, like that needs tons of power, and the grid's not ready. And so yeah, it's an interesting time right now. It feels like it's a free ball in terms of like no one really knows where it's all going to land and what the repercussions of this are. But interesting days. And then I'm going to be in New York. When people are listening to this, I'll be in New York.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's
what's going on in New York.
Hanging out, some meetings, but also one of our friends, Brent Hodge, the filmmaker, Hodgie Films. Yeah, he's doing an HBO premiere of one of his productions. So
yay!
I'll be going to that. Hey, Hodgie, if you're listening, probably not. But that's on Thursday, the 16th. And then I'm going to be attending a conference called Dervos, Distributed Energy Resources Conference called Dervos in New York. So yeah, just continuing to cast the net out there and just have killer conversations on the coolest things. And our solar punk friends are actually powering the concert on the second day of Dervos.
Amazing.
Yeah. So cool. They're still doing it post Burning Man, and rolling with it.
Yeah, totally. And we've had some conversations with some of our friends who power, big stages and whatnot too. It feels like the music industry is really like moving quickly, and there's a lot of cool power moves out there happening.
Totally. I think it's being fully embraced in the music industry. I mean, it's still got a long way to go, but it just feels so fresh and open and collaborative. And when people are doing huge and bigger productions, literally in real time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it feels refreshing, because film's been at it for 10 years, and although it's happening, it still feels clunky. And I don't know, we haven't truly unpacked that. Maybe we'll do an episode where we go deeper and unpack that, but I don't know. It may cause some waves, but it's like, like you can do it. We're top secret.
Honestly, there are interesting conversations going on. There are interesting observations, trends, like people who are working in it can see like, oh, wait a second, here's a gap. And then it's like that, full on problem solving mode, but it's not just like this micro like issue. It is like an industry wide issue.
Yeah.
And so these kinds of things are coming up, and we're, observing where the next, move needs to be made. And, if we're really going to take that leap. So I mean, yeah, kudos to Music World. They're rolling with it. So that's
It's
cool.
making it happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. So yeah, we'll see what happens. And it's also, yeah, it's the nice thing about music is it's, you've got like these larger organizations as well that are doing productions all around North America or tours all around North America. And it's, one night show and then or one festival. So we're going to see like Coachella is going to go, like things like that. It's all happening. And film, yeah, again, that's a whole other, story too, right? With, thinking about AI and all these like,
Oh man.
yeah,
There's a
like
lot.
what's going on with tech and AI and film. So it's like, yeah, that'll be another episode.
Yeah, we'll dive into it at some point, I'm sure.
Totally.
So.
And then today we're continuing our collaboration with Jackson Wild, a nonprofit that brings together filmmakers, scientists, and conservationists from around the world to inspire action for our planet. Every year they host the Jackson Wild Media Awards, which shine a spotlight on some of the most powerful stories about nature, science, and conservation being told today, including innovation in green production.
Yeah, we had the privilege of speaking with the winner of the 2025 Innovation in Green Production Awards, Shared Planet, which is a natural history series centered on coexistence and environmental restoration. We talked about both storytelling and also leaned into the sustainable production side of content creation. So this is another just inspiring conversation about the production, and we had the production team on, and it just shows how folks are telling impactful stories from around the world while minimizing their carbon footprint and integrating sustainable practices.
Yeah, totally. And please do like and subscribe and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues and spread the word and check out the documentaries that they're at Jackson Wild. And yeah, really appreciate the support and collaboration with Jackson Wild. Today we have the production team from Shared Planet, the 2025 Innovation in Green Production Award winner at Jackson Wild. Congratulations. We love having group interviews. And today joining us are Armen, the production manager for River Roads Films, Matt, production coordinator, and Lynn, line producer.
Yeah, so Shared Planet is a natural history series filmed across dozens of countries. Shared Planet brings together untold stories of people and wildlife thriving, from orangutans in Borneo to beavers in Idaho. But behind the camera, just as much thought went into reducing impacts, lowering the carbon footprint, and rethinking the way that natural history television is made. So we love getting to know the people behind the scenes who are doing great work. So we pose the question, how do you get into filmmaking and what sparks your passion for this crazy industry? So here we go. And you want to go first?
I started out in narrative features and did a few films before going into factual TV for a while. And then found myself lucky enough to fall into the River Road team, working originally on an IMAX film's bonus features. And from there, I just sort of found that the team's really great to work with and the work is really interesting. And that was about 10 years ago. So I'm still at it and now production managing. I also work in development a little bit. And we have a fairly small team, relatively, I would say. It's fair to say. So everybody does get to have a little bit of variation in their work and try different things. And that's been my path.
Nice. Lynn, what about you?
Well, I'm actually fortunate enough to have been in documentary production for over 30 years.
Wow. Okay.
And I haven't worked in narrative or anything like that. So it's been solely documentary production. So I feel very fortunate that I've been able to do that because I know a lot of people can't. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So half of my work has been in the natural history realm, and the other half is in more like social, political, cultural projects with other clients. But I've been working with River Road Films for about 16 years now, since basically their first film that was in the Canadian funding system. And then as the company's grown, my role has obviously grown as well. But I manage basically the day-to-day management of productions, but I also handle all the business affairs and legal and finance.
Amazing. Amazing. Sounds like River Road Films has some longevity on its side in this space. So with the team as well. Matt, how about you? How did you come to this?
Yeah, so I've only ever really worked in wildlife film. I haven't had a gig
Okay.
outside of the wildlife space in the film industry before. I did sort of a dual degree in English and environmental science, and sort of got into wildlife conservation with some marine biology stuff overseas. And when I saw an opportunity to work for Canada's public broadcasting, CBC, in 2016, I jumped at it, and it was pretty much exactly what I went to school for, was writing about the environment, doing a lot of the pitching, a lot of the fact checking for scripts and things like that. And that got me into the space. And then that's how I found River Road Films, is they're sort of the leading wildlife film company in Canada. And so I ended up on the West Coast and joined them here in 2017. So I've been with the team here for about 8 or 9 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Way to go, team.
Yeah, that's amazing. And cheers to Canada.
I know.
I'm Canadian actually as well.
Are
So
you?
Too.
yeah. So there we go.
Yeah. So
and the
we're,
CBC, cheers to the CBC
yeah,
for fostering a lot of this stuff.
100%. My team actually worked with them to develop their sustainability strategy years ago. So yay, we're all connected in some way. Cool. So let's dive into Shared Planet. Can you just tell us, we really like kind of, getting into, the details for those people out there who are, maybe coming to this, and you guys are pretty experienced. So, coming to this maybe first and trying to figure out how to incorporate sustainability and what that even means and that sort of thing. I would love for you all to just start at the very, very beginning. And, when did the kernel, really, or when did the seed, when was that planted? When did you know, how did you start planning, sustainable production, and how did that sort of, transpire over the, I guess, pre-production period? Who wants to take that? And this is where you guys just jump in, because I'm not sure who should kick that off.
I'll get the conversation started, and Matt and Lynn could jump in anytime. But basically, this project was a dream child of Jeff and Chelsea Turner for probably 10 years prior, I think. It had different titles, it had different development paths, and I think it had been pitched. And it was a long trip for them to try to bring this to the screen. So it was really their vision of trying to show an optimistic view of how people can live alongside nature and that both benefit. And that's really the kernel of the idea, that it's not an imposition to do conservation and protect the natural environment, but it's actually a benefit to people. So it kind of started at that point, and that basic principle was baked into the concept of the show. So it wasn't an unnatural fit in any way for us to adopt things like the BAFTA Albert program, which you probably are very familiar with, which encourages tracking and monitoring our carbon and landfill waste and a number of other metrics, so that we can have the data to look at, and we can also just sort of bring it to our awareness more often, because that's kind of one of the strategies that I think emerged in early production, is just to keep this principle of being efficient and as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm really curious to lean in on this planning process, because it sounds like it was in development for a while, and it just kind of made sense given the nature of the film. And what were the conversations like behind the scenes about sustainability? And when, when did that happen? Was it, months out or years out from, the actual like start of production? And who was in those conversations? Is it like a couple people or, more at River Road? Like how did that all come to be?
I think what's really interesting sort of about our space generally and sustainability is that we can't really operate without taking it into consideration. And the more that we're able to sort of cut emissions and focus on sustainability, the better we're able to do our jobs and the more costs we end up cutting. So when we focus on ways that we can travel less and do more with what we've got, and focus on ways we can reuse materials and supplies, we're saving money as we move forward through production. So these conversations take place. I mean, years might be a little bit ambitious, but definitely several months before we move into production about are we going to be focusing on organizing our shoots in ways, especially when we're it's a global series. How are we going to travel to all these remote places? Are we going to be able to sort of organize our shoots and the timing of specific wildlife behavior in a way that we can now travel around that corner of the world without having to come back to home base and use all those flight emissions and cost for flying crew back and forth? How can we work with locals to sort of keep an eye on the movements and habits of wildlife so we don't actually have to fly folks out? And we work really closely with local conservationists who tell us a lot about what's going on the ground before we even set foot there. So that's a big way that we can kind of focus on making sure that we're not jet setting around the globe and making things worse for ourselves, because we encounter climate change every time we go out on a shoot, whether it's the ice flow edge is not where we predicted it would be, or the animals aren't behaving the way they normally would this time of year because it's a little bit warmer or a little bit cooler. So sustainability is something that I don't think we're ever not thinking about.
Yeah, it seems like it's integrated into the way you want to work and the story you're telling too, right? Which I think is super cool, because that's like those are the two sides of the coin, really, like the kind of storytelling side of it all, and then matching that with how you operate as a team. So
yeah, but I just was, before we get too deep, I just want to like pull it back just a little bit, because just to get clear on some of the stories in coexistence that you're referring to, so we can get a visual of some of these examples of you said flow edge, obviously, and you're in your Arctic, and then you probably are in the jungle and so on. What does it mean for folks to coexist? And then also, what themes are you seeing then in all of these environments, especially with climate change you mentioned? It's a loaded question, but you can take it any way you want.
Go ahead, Armen. Yes. Yeah, I think a big one for us, and especially with Shared Planet, was this idea of a positive message. So inspiring hope, as opposed to sort of the doom and gloom that a lot of these extinction stories and extinction series that we've been seeing sort of leave people with that, oh, but what can I do at home kind of feeling. So in these instances, these stories all sort of look at ways in which people and wildlife can both benefit off a shared space. And that was kind of the general theme that we were looking at across all of our stories. And so a lot of what that looks like is local groups, farmers, hunters, gatherers, all kinds of different groups of people, figuring out ways that they can work to conserve the environment in a way that would benefit the local community as well as benefiting that particular species. So like a good example that I like to talk about a lot is bats in Mexico and agave farmers. So the plant used to make tequila. So there was a group of farmers that were realizing their agave plants were not being fertilized the way they had been, 5-10 years ago, and a lot of their crops were dying out. So they sort of looked at what were they missing from their general ecosystem, and the bat population had dwindled, and they were on not the brink of extinction, but their numbers were definitely coming close to endangered. And they realized that their agave plants were only fertilized by this one specific species of bat. So these farmers decided to group together and conserve the species of bat. Their numbers increased, and their ability to then pollinate the farmers' agave crops skyrocketed. So everyone's happy. The bats have a place to be. The farmers are pollinating and producing more agave than they ever have been before. And they're able to sort of certify their tequila as environmentally friendly, and everyone's happy. So that's kind of what that's the mold that we were sort of looking for, to see if we could fit stories that kind of carry that message of hope. So they all sort of have that same theme of wildlife and humans both benefiting in a way in a shared space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Another one was trying to preserve the lions in Kenya as a keystone species. That's one of the things we come across a lot is when there's a lot of environmental problems in places. Sometimes it's because of the collapse of a key species that either keeps in line like herbivores that it preys on, or it serves another function. Well, another great, really good example of that, a very clear example, was in Idaho, where they have a lot of drought starting to become more of a problem year after year. And they found out that there was a connection between the beavers that they had considered a pest and they had been eradicating all this time, and the way that their beaver dams would have saturated the ground so that the rivers would keep flowing. So we followed a farmer doing a pilot project, reintroducing beavers onto his land, which is very counterintuitive for a lot of farmers because it does change the landscape. But the rivers would flow well into the summer, where they were drying out right at the end of the winter. So it was a clear benefit that then encouraged all this other biodiversity to come back, because now there was fertile swamplands and ponds that sustained all these other species. So it's sometimes just placing back a keystone species or protecting a keystone species can protect the whole environment from collapsing and turning into a desert.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just the way that, this idea of coexistence has come up, maybe it's come across my radar a lot lately. And I'm wondering if, I know there have been, films made on this, stories told on this for years, but is somehow this concept like, because we're seeing these shifts in, the landscape because of climate change, do you think that this is coming up more and more? Are you noticing that? Or is it just like, I happen to have an algorithm on my phone that's showing me this stuff? What is it? What are you seeing in that regard?
I'll throw this to my colleagues, but I would say that our work, it's not inorganic to us to adopt green policies, because it actually increases our efficiency in a lot of ways, and it's also just consistent with the themes that we're covering. But it's part and parcel of a general principle that, like, there's an organization called Producing for the Planet that I think maybe Lynn could speak to, but it's the idea is that as filmmakers, we have the opportunity to table stories that can provide information to the public to get a better understanding on things. And from our point of view, but even not globally, but just our simple, like our work, we're definitely affected by climate change. Like the ice in the Arctic, as Matt alluded to, like it has been moving around either because of wind pattern changes that are different than historical norms, or temperature changes, sometimes colder, sometimes hotter, water levels change. So in our line of work of capturing natural history, it's a great deal of it is time-based, seasonal-based. All of nature sort of goes on a clock where these different events dovetail into each other. A herring spawn then creates this big burst of bald eagle populations, and they, their well-being depends on that herring spawn. So something like a temperature change can radically affect hatching of fish eggs.
I mean, just to jump in, because I've been doing a lot of thinking about this as well. Sort of thinking about regenerative systems, right? And what we're talking about here is that these are complex systems, right? We've reduced a lot of these over the last few hundred years, right? Sort of a more reductionist mindset. But what we're seeing now is you're actually looking at complex systems and how everything is influencing everything else, right? Which is how we need to look at things. But we don't, right? We just sort of like simplified everything, and it's not, right? And I don't know, I just think that's an interesting way of looking at it. And that's something that sounds like truly you guys are exploring.
Yeah, and I feel like
Mhm.
you know, production is a system too, right? And I think that's, you know, just to segue into like what that system looked like. One of the things I read about this production that I loved is the engagement aspect, even in prep with folks, crew, on-screen talent, suppliers. I read that you sent sort of a green questionnaire around during onboarding. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that was and what information you were asking for?
Sure. This is part of our start pack, is we attach a green memo questionnaire outlining our initiatives and what we're trying to achieve for this production, and then asking our vendors and our crew to join our efforts. So in terms of, you know, having our crew document green practices on location versus, and also vendors, you know, it's harder with vendors because they're you know, arm's length from us, but we can certainly influence our crews to also contribute to making this as green a production as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's also created a ripple effect with the little margin that we have of control of maybe talking to multiple different rental agents, for example, and asking if they have electric cars. And we can mention to their management, you know, on the film rental side, if you guys have electric, would prefer that. Or we're going to go with this other vendor because they have electric or hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
So it just creates a little nudge in the right direction. And then if a film truck rental company electric vehicles, they become available to other productions.
Right.
So then it encourages sort of a spiral in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. I love that that term ripple effect, right? And it's like every ask, you know, leads to maybe something else, or at least, you know, that demand, it just starts to add up.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of little things that add up over time. So compostable coffee pods, reusable water bottles, compostable plates and cutlery, and recycled paper at the office. It's just that those small things tend to lead up, and when you sort of create a culture that's always kind of looking for the green alternative, it kind of becomes second nature. So I think a big part of that green memo is sort of creating that instinct just to sort of reach for the reusable item over the single-use plastic when you've got that choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also loved that you included organizational efficiency as one of your like core elements to focus on. What you know, I know you just named off a few practices, but what just, you know, how did that factor into things like, you know, the budget and cost savings and whatnot? In my mind, when I hear efficiency, I naturally think of, you know, cost reductions, but how did it play out for you?
One of our biggest costs is travel when it comes to these productions. It's the flights, and especially with some productions we do are local Canadian based, some even West Coast based. But when you're looking at something like Shared Planet, which sort of reaches across the globe, yeah, those flights become quite expensive and logistically sort of difficult to navigate when you've got sort of 3 flights all lined up to get you to some super remote place. So in order for us to be efficient, we kind of package our shoots in sort of parts of the world so that we're able to sort of stick around that area.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of efficiency, for example, just on our recent production, we've had a producer who sort of home based on the east coast of Canada, as opposed to sort of flying back every 2 weeks. They'd be stationed out there, and they'd be shooting all of the East Coast content in the series, over the span of a month. So those sorts of things, is kind of having sort of areas that will sort of stick around in to capture several different stories with different groups of folks, as opposed to kind of coming back to Canada every time between, which a lot of productions will sort of do to bring the data and the equipment back. We've been pretty lucky to be able to sort of have crew that are able to sort of stick out in the wild for quite some time, and be able to sort of supply our own kit as well, and rely a little bit less on rental housing, having one core group of equipment that we'll reuse from a production to production. So we're not always sort of consistently buying new things. We're finding ways that we can reuse what we've got and have in the past. So that's a great way to save cost, while also cutting down on emissions from flights and being more efficient with our crews in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you doing that though in, let's say, developing countries, or I'm assuming that you've been to some of those areas? Is it much more challenging to navigate versus obviously Canada or US might have better options?
For sure. Like a lot of those faraway places that we get to, local contributors, local conservationists are just worth their weight in gold. They're invaluable, and we wouldn't be able to make these productions without their support. Having someone be able to go check on a pond to see if a fishing cat is active without us having to fly someone over there to check it out. It really makes our lives so much easier. And those relationships are we really like to foster that, those relationships with biologists, wildlife conservationists, people who are on the ground consistently, so that they can give us great feedback on what's happening before we hit the ground running. So that saves us a lot of time, cost, emissions, all sorts of stuff. So when we're in a lot of developing countries, working closely with people who have been there a long time and are local to that area is definitely the way to go for us.
Mm-hmm.
It can be unexpected. There can be a lot of unexpected benefits as well. For example, when we were filming our Calcutta story, we hired a local scout to go and just get us some visuals just to figure out what it's going to look like. And that saved us sending a team there to do our own recce by just looking for local talent. But it turned out remarkably good. So good, in fact, that we were pleased to put it into the show itself. So sometimes, reaching out to local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, it'll have a lot of unexpected benefits as well as efficiency. So it's kind of like, it's not for us. It's a natural fit to that. Our efficiency sort of ends up also reducing carbon.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And so, in organizing all of this, did you have, I feel like I saw in an email, Armen, was it you and Matt who are like the green team, or were more people engaged? Or Lynn, how did you, champion this? I'm just curious.
Well, I come from a different angle. I'm more arm's length, but there are federal and provincial initiatives in Canada for being climate conscious in production. So that's where I'm coming in at, is, meeting our obligations to our broadcaster, meeting our obligations to producing the planet, which we're a member of. But Matt and Armen truly are the green team.
Hence exactly.
I know, you guys
Hence the ferns in the
sitting.
background.
Totally.
That like Pacific Spirit Park.
I'm not sure that was a decoration from.
Oh, it's not a background.
Oh, it is like an actual
cool.
on the wall. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, I'm just, as the green team, talk me through your process, your day to day. I mean, this is for people who are trying to do this stuff and, are soaking up any tips you have for how to coordinate, how to, integrate, sustainable practices. What does it look like as a team?
Well, we took a lot of inspiration from Albert and Producing for the Planet, and their sort of principle-based approach is that if you have green initiatives from the top, it trickles down. And sometimes that's making people do stuff, and sometimes it's leading by example. But either way, by putting it out there that we don't want single-use plastics. We don't have people, a production assistant going and purchasing a big case of water bottles, which you might have done in the past. Everybody brings reusable bottles and reuses them, and so it's if we have it sort of hammered in on our call sheets, on our onboarding, as Lynn mentioned, and other opportunities where it's organic to say there's a choice to be made here, and we'd like the green choice to be made when you're renting a vehicle. Look for the hybrid. It's not that you can always do it, but you do what you can. And that sort of principle-based approach, it does affect the crew, because then they'll find themselves in a situation where there's no rule book, there's no guidebook. We are a very small production company relatively, and our teams are small. So our shoots might just be 4 or 5 people sometimes, or less. So we're not going to police them, and it wouldn't really be efficient or comfortable or beneficial for us to have a heavy hand with this. But if we have just the culture of let's see what we can do, then when that production assistant is shopping and they're making the decision, they make the better decision, knowing that everybody else is trying to work on the same team.
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead,
we're
Matt.
also very, very lucky in that, like, we don't have a huge crafty truck that we have to roll up.
Right.
We don't need mains power. So a lot of the time we'll be using, light battery packs, rechargeable batteries, instead of, plugging into a generator, for example. We'll keep an eye on Airbnbs that have solar power as opposed to staying at fancy hotels. All of those sorts of things, like the little stuff really adds up. And towards the end of the production, like what we really love about Albert and the BAFTA program is that it's got a great layout and structure for tracking your emissions, so that at the end of production, you can actually see, like on a pie chart, sort of what your areas for improvement are. And so that's really helpful. But just being like a really small, close-knit team goes a long way. And these guys, like all of our team, they're really experienced backcountry folks, no trace camping kind of stuff. So that mentality really seeps out into the day-to-day, packing out waste, making sure we're as low waste as possible. Meal sharing. Typically, our crew will always be preparing and cooking their own meals together, as opposed to eating out at restaurants and things like that. So small little decisions over the course of an entire production, they really add up.
Yeah. And how many folks were on your production team, and how long was your shoot?
Lynn would probably have a picture of you.
For Shared Planet, I think that we probably onboard, each of our individual crews, as Armen and Matt are saying, are small, especially when we have international travel. But we may have multiple crews at a time. So like overall, we may have onboarded maybe 40 people for this production. And that covers everyone from field crew to production office and post-production. Like in our current production, I think we have 50 total. But these projects are long. Like we're running usually 12 to 18 months of shooting.
Wow.
Yeah. In all of this, I know Albert has the predictive carbon footprint at the very beginning in pre-production. You do that, and then you get your final kind of at the end. Is there anything that surprised you, or that you thought, might have been more difficult or easier, that, didn't turn out the way you thought in this whole process? Just curious.
Nothing immediate comes to mind on that one.
Okay.
I think cargo, moving our equipment around the world, became sort of like when we first went to Shared Planet, a lot of the productions that we'd focused on had been very, North America based, so we weren't shipping cargo across the world. So finding efficient ways, both with cost and emission, to do that became definitely a huge focus of Armen and my job. It's just making sure that the kit is where it needed to be when it needed to be there. So being able to find locals where we could leave our kit in a location or ship it far ahead of time, so we don't have that time crunch where we're having to spend extra money on priority shipping and that kind of thing. That definitely was something that sort of snuck up on us that we had to really learn a lot about pretty early on in this international production. Because that for sure is a huge expenditure when it comes to taking a look at that with Albert was, oh my goodness, we are really flying this cargo all over the place. So finding ways to make our kit as streamlined as possible, getting our crew really acquainted and oriented with that kit. So we're not sending the guys out with guys and girls out with items that would be nice to have. They're traveling with exactly what they need. So we have days of kit prep where the kit's all spread across the warehouse to make sure they've got every little piece that they need and nothing extra is being brought along. Because that extra stuff is it's a luxury that we can't really afford when it comes to the environment and the cost of just shipping our kit all over the world. So having crew that are local to Vancouver can come to our warehouse and really get acquainted with what they've got, so they're not bringing extra stuff around, and working with folks who are really used to that sort of lightweight backcountry camping. So yeah, having staying focused on only going out with what we need was a big learning curve for us when it came to this international production.
Right. And were a lot of locations actually camping based?
I don't know what the percentage would be. Does 30% camping, 70% not camping? Does that kind of sound about right to you?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. I think that sort of definitely not the majority, but definitely a substantial amount of backcountry stuff, especially in remote places like up north. And yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually curious. I spent some time up north as well, but what was the coexistence that you guys were documenting up north? Oh, anybody want to jump in
Yeah.
there?
We've got just a lot of shoots on the brain right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like, we're going with
Okay.
it.
Mini or north?
We're just wrapping up another year action that's been probably the equal amount of shooting as the 2 years of Shared Planet, except compressed.
Right.
It's a little bit difficult sometimes to separate one shoot from another.
Well, I'm just curious
Yeah.
about the North in general, because it's very, they're kind of ground zero. Zena and I have talked to quite a few people about the Arctic as well, and it's a very top of mind and ground zero for climate change. So be curious to know what the story of positive coexistence is up there and that you guys were documenting, or at least some ideas that you guys are seeing up there.
One really great one that comes to mind was in Bristol Bay in Alaska. So they had a salmon fishery, a salmon run up there that was just falling apart over the last 10 years. And it wasn't really being monitored that closely. And over the last, I think, 5 years or decade, the fisheries management started working very closely with the fishermen up there to sort of limit the amount of time they could spend catching salmon in Bristol Bay. And what that takes is someone out there counting each salmon that runs upriver. And so when they have a certain amount of salmon that have made it upriver that they know will be able to sustain the population for the following year, they'll open their fishery. And so what that has done is it's created, I think it's the largest salmon fishery on Earth. I know it's the largest salmon fishing fleet on Earth. I don't know if the fishery is the largest, but it's definitely up there. And it has quadrupled over the last 10 years. I don't hold me to those numbers. I don't have the fact check in front of me, but it's quite surprising how well that population has rebounded just by the fishermen working closely with the management, making sure that the number of salmon make it upstream that can then sustain the population for the following year. So I think that was one of my favorite stories from sort of the northern areas when it comes to Shared Planet that sort of inspire hope. Because I mean, with this. It's tough because we've seen so many stories that kind of leave you with that feeling of, oh, well, I'm so little, what can I do? This problem is so much bigger than me. And I think we came up against that a lot when Chelsea and Jeff were going around seeing if they could get some interest in this documentary. It's, oh, we've heard the extinction story a million times. How is this different? And what's different about this is that it inspires hope. And in a way that, humans are very sort of we're inherently selfish. So how do we benefit from conserving the environment? And so being able to kind of show ways across the world, I'm not sure. I think we had about 15 examples of ways in which people were directly benefiting from conserving wildlife populations. So that was sort of a little bit different. And yeah, so finding those stories can also be a little bit tough, but there's so many out there. So being able to sort of take that to the big screen and show people that, we can operate in coexistence and harmony. It's a real possibility. Was pretty inspiring and special to be a part of a show like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm-hmm.
the salmon story is a great example, Matt. Yeah, because they were on the brink of collapse. So this natural sort of phenomenon of these salmon returning every year and going upriver was just going to end, and then and all the human element would have suffered greatly. So the conservation effort really helped both the fishing community, the people who rely on it, and this natural phenomenon of this incredible number of salmon survive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes to show that, I mean, how resilient the earth actually is. And I think that's always something that's interesting. I mean, we tread so hard on the earth, but you give it a little bit, and it just wants to regenerate and wants to come back. So I love those. Yeah, I look forward to seeing this movie, this documentary.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Lynn, because we have you and we don't get to talk to a ton of line producers. So I'm super excited. But just, from your perspective in all of this, with these positive examples of sustainable production, and then obviously the wonderful storytelling and whatnot, what helps you build your case for the next time around, or what do you look for, that is replicable, that you can do, that you can improve, that you can, budget, that you can save money? Like, I'm just curious what your perspective is in all of this.
Well, I mean, I have to look at the meeting the expectations, as I mentioned before, of our broadcasters and distributors in terms of climate action. And then we balance that, of course, with the story that we're trying to tell, and how can we make all of this happen, still meet those initiatives and still tell the story. And, I think that we keep finding that small things, as you say, we've seen, is that they stack up and cumulatively turn out that it can be make a huge difference. So in terms of story, a lot of what River Road Films focuses on are positive stories. And I think that when there's so many other negative stories, or doom and gloom type stories, or how we're destroying the planet stories, it's really helpful for the audience to have those little glimmers of hope, knowing that even as an individual, that you can make a difference. And so, if we can tell stories that also foster that, I think that also is interesting to buyers, for example. So it just allows us to continue the momentum in building these green productions and telling green stories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing
Amen.
from you all is that it's really important to plan early. It's really important to kind of integrate, sustainable practices into all aspects, and, interesting things like thinking about shipping and, how that, can be efficient, and these sorts of things is all part of that planning process, it sounds like. And
Sure. And the part of, there's always that push and pull, like where, Matt and Armen are trying to achieve, like, move gear across the country. And I'm like, oh, how much is that going to cost? And,
right.
They want to do it efficiently and meet our, our Albert initiatives. And so I'm always trying to say, okay, well, what's the cheapest way we can do that? But also, what is the greenest way we can do that? And so between Matt and Armen and me, we come up with the best possible solution to meet all of those requirements as best we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a values alignment, and everybody's aligned as well. I mean, that's probably,
Cool.
the one of the biggest things out there. Even though the push pull is healthy, but it seems like
Mhm.
you guys are all very aligned. It's very important, and I'm sure
Yeah.
your other 40 crew members also believe in that mission and we're aligned.
Yeah.
Definitely. And one of the sort of pleasant surprises that a lot of producers may not really be aware of yet is that, like, one of the biggest line items is fuel.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
efficiency in flights, efficiency in vehicles, getting hybrids or electric vehicles wherever possible. It might cost a bit more on one line item, but it ends up saving a huge amount on the other line item. So by gathering data and by kind of tracking data, we can then be armed with data when we're in a production meeting or a budget meeting to say, yeah, that's going to, it's $500 more here, but look, we're saving 1,000 over there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all these green initiatives. They're very, I wouldn't say they're onerous to take on. It's more of a mental, challenge to make sure that we're thinking about it. But then it ends up saving money the vast majority of the time, I would
Mhm.
say, especially because our biggest item is travel and fuel for carbon.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Um, yeah. Maybe you just answered it, but one of the things we try to ask everyone, because we're just really curious, what bubbles to the top for people. But let's say you're going to create a new playbook for sustainable production in natural history television. What is, the first guiding principle on your list? What do you think that would be?
I would probably be lazy and use the playbooks that a lot of people have already spent a great deal of time working on, like producing
great.
for the
That's
planet.
great.
Yeah. I mean, we're plugging them quite a bit because they've just done a lot of really great work in sort of preparing toolkits for
Mhm.
Yeah.
producers and line producers, production managers, and then even down the line to have like conservation representatives on set. So there's at different scales, obviously, we wouldn't have a dedicated person at our scale, but they are really have put together a really great toolkit, and it's free
Mhm.
to access a lot of material where you can find those line items in the budget where you can analyze them and say, is this one where we could both save money on as well as be green? And that's a really easy case to make, especially on larger productions, dramatic productions, not just in our sphere where it's kind of very naturally green for a great deal of it. But a lot of productions like TV and film need to make a case to their executives. It can be a harder case to make when it's trying to make a green rider to make sure the executives don't fly in a private jet, I'm sure. But the area where we do have control, we can actually be armed with data by collecting the data on previous shoots and then saying, look, yeah, you're right. It costs an extra $500 that day to rent that electric car, but look at this line item. The gas was this high and now it's this. Or we traveled this distance,
Ooh.
but we did it this much more efficiently.
Mhm. Mhm.
Another good example of sort of things that we like to kind of check in on when we're starting a new production and corners where I find it interesting that we've been able to align cutting costs, cutting emissions, and creating things more efficient. Because if you can get all those three together, that's kind of what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
Is aerial filming, which has just changed so
Mhm.
drastically in the last 5 or 10 years.
Yep.
We used to pretty much exclusively use, we're one of the few companies with a shot over or the Cineflex. It's like a large gimbal that you'd sort of hook onto the bottom of a helicopter to get these big, wide, beautiful, expansive aerials of the environment, which for wildlife documentaries is like such a big part of what we do is we need to get these big shots of where we are. And being able to sort of capture those same aerials and those same dramatic shots with a drone has just been, it's changed everything for us. So instead of having to rent a helicopter, to fill it with fuel and fly it for 8 hours a day for 4 days in a row to get these shots, we've just got these operators who we work closely with, and we make sure all of our guys have, the advanced licenses and they're able to fly in the States with their FAA licenses as well. we're able to just sort of put up a drone and get that same footage, which does all three. So I think checking in on sort of what new technology is available each year, or not each year, but, sort of between productions, and where we can kind of spend a little bit of money up front to save a lot of money on the back end. Batteries too, they're getting lighter,
Yeah.
easier to charge. They hold charge for longer now. All those sorts of things where we can kind of get all three: emissions lower, more efficient, and cut costs. Like anywhere we can get those three dialed in, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
That's
Get that
amazing.
holistic, view of the whole production. And
Yeah.
I love that point of saving money in the end. Even though you got to spend a little more upfront. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Another thing that helps us do this, and it may not be the perfect recipe for every company, but we do a lot in-house that a lot of people outsource. So post-production, for example, Jacques, our post-production supervisor, does a huge amount of things that are sometimes outsourced to other suppliers. We do all our data management, archival, all our post, all our grading, so we don't have to use multiple facilities for that. We don't have to buy new hard drives, for example. Like you'll see a production, it's a small thing, but buying a stack of hard drives and then at the end they're just liquidated, or buying a set decoration and they're just liquidated, or buying equipment that's very specialized, like a electric fence to keep away bears, on another expedition, and it be just purchased and then liquidated at the end. But we'll keep it in our warehouse. Our camera equipment, same thing. Jack, we have a phenomenal camera technician who, instead of having to mail out a tripod head, which is going to take up carbon, it's going to take cost, extraordinary cost sometimes for repairs, especially with all the suppliers being in the US and we're in Canada. So he'll take that, he has the skills to fabricate new parts. So he'll CNC a new part, he'll disassemble, he'll repair. And just having the idea that we do a lot ourselves ends up being very efficient and saving carbon and landfill waste and so many other things.
Yeah, that doing everything in-house, it might not seem big, but just one hydro bill for our office where we have our post-production suites, everything's right here. Not only does that cut costs on the hydro and the electric for the office and stuff, but also like that synergy that takes place where, an editor can pop out and say, hey, Matt, remember that shot? Or do you remember that day that we did this? Just having everything in-house is something that I find quite unique about River Road Films. And it really is one of those things that makes things super efficient, cheaper, more environmentally friendly, just everyone being, under the same roof and on the same team. So
And
yeah,
creates
that goes
that
a long way.
magic. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, amazing. I mean, it just sounds like, having the alignment with the team, having the synergy, at the company and, doing this work that tells positive stories. It all is kind of aligning here, and really appreciate you sharing all of this and, diving into some detail with us. It certainly helps, get an idea of how this stuff can be done, and hopefully inspires others to emulate, what you're doing, and, working as a team and all, saving money, being efficient, the whole bit. So, Armen, Matt, and Lynn, really, really appreciate your time and for sharing this, and congratulations on the award. That's wonderful. And, look for you again on the next one.
Yeah. And where can folks find out more about your productions and, about River Road?
Riverroadfilms.ca is a great spot, and a Shared Planet's going to be on PBS, although the air date may have been pushed, I think, into the spring. Lynn, have you heard exactly when that's going to be now?
I don't think it's been set yet, but it was pushed.
All right.
Viewers
Excellent.
in Canada can watch it on CBC Gem for free.
Excellent.
And if you're in Germany, you can watch it on Arte as of Monday. And
Amazing.
stay tuned for the PBS release.
Nice. All right, everyone.
Thanks,
well,
y'all.
now you know. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks, Zena and Mark. Take care.
All right.
Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Social media is by Picnic Social. Our editor and producer is Rachel Werbel.